History has come alive here in Boston this week. Last night, the oldest time capsule in the nation was opened, and WGBH News arts editor Jared Bowen was there for the big unveiling.
It was quite a special event. Journalists from all over the world were interested in the artifacts that had been packed into a time capsule commissioned by Revolutionary War VIPs centuries ago.
In the Museum of Fine Arts, amid a host of American masterpieces, sat the long sealed time capsule, once installed by Samuel Adams and Paul Revere.
You're here to witness an historic event, the opening of a 200-year-old time capsule unearthed from below the Massachusetts State House.
The time capsule was initially installed beneath a State House cornerstone in 1795. During construction of an addition 60 years later, the time capsule was opened, its contents cataloged, and then was repacked in this brass box along with more artifacts from the 1800s, all revealed in an MFA X-ray. Then last month, out of concerns for its well-being, MFA lead conservator Pam Hatchfield removed the box once again during a grueling 7-hour session, leading to last night's big reveal.
Oh, newspapers.
What's that on the top?
There's something.
We've got some inscription.
There's something written on here. This says, Andrea.
For more than an hour, Hatchfield meticulously removed the contents, using a porcupine quill, plastic strips, and even her grandfather's old dental tool.
I'm worried about this one.
You can see they've obviously taken the newspaper, the larger folio construct, and folded them up many times and literally compacted them into the box itself, so it's a very tight fit.
Packed within the 1.5-inch deep brass box were items mostly still in great condition. 5 newspapers, a medal depicting George Washington, colonial-era records, and an inscribed silver plate.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
We've got coins, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
The capsule also included 23 coins, including a pine tree shilling dating to 1652, one of the first coins minted by the rebel colony.
These symbols, as they were, when they were placed in the State House in 1795, I believe represented the aspirations of the Founding Fathers and those who came after them.
And the process of removing and preserving those artifacts, as you saw, is the stuff of extreme detail. Joining me now after last night's high-pressure event and with insight on what happens next with the time capsule are the two main people behind it all, Pam Hatchfield, Head of Objects Conservation at the Museum of Fine Arts, and Michael Como, Executive Director of the Massachusetts Archives and Commonwealth Museum. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Pam, I've been in any number of conservation labs. I can't even go near the artifacts most of the time, and there you were last night on stage, Michael commenting right next to you, but you had all of these people watching you. You really hadn't lifted off the lid of the box. You didn't know what you were going to find. What kind of pressure did you feel?
I felt an awful lot of pressure earlier in the day, and I seemed to have calmed myself down and steadied my nerves enough so that when I sat there in that moment, I was able to focus on the work.
And what was the experience like with the tools and going through these pieces? I mean, you must have this expertise that you know how to lift out, but you have to really anticipate whatever you're going to find for whatever scenario was there.
Well, we knew that there were newspapers and other kinds of paper artifacts, and that there would be coins and the plaque, the inscribed plaque. We didn't know exactly what condition they would be in, though, and so we actually use some very simple kinds of tools, but tools that we think will not damage the objects that we're treating. And of course, we did say that if we felt that it was dangerous to remove any of this material, we would have to stop. And I really didn't want to have to do that because people were so excited, and it would have been a shame.
I know you're nearing the Al Capone's vault territory there, I think, for a moment last night with one of those comments I think we put in the piece. And Michael, we knew what was in the time capsule.
We did,
It's been well documented. But for you, and your team has been working on this for so long, in terms of preparing what was in it, understanding what was in it, what was it to actually see these objects in the light of day?
You know, seeing it on an inventory is one thing, but seeing it actually there in front of you, that's something else. And for myself as an archivist, that's sort of the thrill of our profession, that we get to deal with these materials and seeing these materials. It's that connection point. I said this 1,000 times last night when we were talking about it, that it's when you look at the materials left to you by past generations, it's a bridge to them, and it's a connecting point. And seeing something like that, very special. I mean, again, we had the inventory, which is all well and good, but remember, these had been undisturbed for 160 years and put in place initially by Samuel Adams and Paul Revere.
Well, and on Secretary Galvin's point that there could be a very direct link to the objects they very specifically chose to put in the time capsule, what kind of message do you think they were sending with the particular coins, what they included?
Well, I think if you look at it in the entirety of the event that happened that day in 1795 on July 4th, there was this enormous procession, much pomp and ceremony. There was oration. There were artillery salutes. So clearly they knew this was an event of some import. They were laying the cornerstone for the new State House, flowery oration saying, here's the establishment of a place for governance in Massachusetts. The excellent principles of our Constitution need to be ably defended. They hoped that it would last, an eternity. So they were very clearly aware of the historical significance of what they were doing. I think the artifacts were selected for that purpose. When you read the inscription on the plate itself, that they're putting down for time eternal, their purpose there and why they want it to be remembered. And I think, perhaps, and maybe Pam can be better at this than I am, but the coins would maybe be more everlasting than maybe some paper insertion.
Well, and I was just about to ask that. I was really struck. I was very fortunate to be sitting in the front row, and so I saw these objects from just a few feet away. The newspapers looked like they could have been lifted off my desk from this morning. I was astonished at what the condition they were in.
We were actually very, very lucky because the 1855 newspapers were put in a moment when there was still good quality rag paper. We were, however, a little bit later in time, acidic materials begin to be incorporated into the papers, and then we end up with a very acidic environment. And we were also very worried because the coins had been washed with acid in 1855. We didn't know if there were residues, and certainly there was corrosion. We know there was a lot of moisture in the box when it was sealed up. So certainly there was a lot of opportunity for damage to occur, but I think the fact that everything was so tightly packed and that things were very well sealed up hermetically, as they said, made a very good preservation environment. So I think we were quite lucky.
And you have some of your tools here. I was very struck, as I think many were, that you use very practical tools like your porcupine quill, your grandfather's dental tool.
Yes.
This is state-of-the-art conservation, your grandfather's dental tool.
So conservation borrows from many other kinds of disciplines like optical surgery, these tiny little optical surgical knives. We have bamboo tools that are very pliable and soft so they won't damage the materials we're trying to manipulate. Teflon, a lot of dental tools, medical tools, and then some tools that are remarkably similar to the kinds of tools that would have been used when they were actually trying to hone these blocks for the State House. So these are a couple of the tools that I used in the excavation of the block itself. And these have changed very little over the centuries.
Well, Michael, just very, very quickly before we go, it seems like there's going to be a debate now about what actually happens, whether the capsule goes back into the State House. So what's that discussion going to be like?
I know there is discussion as what to do with the final point of it. My understanding is that, of course, they'll be conserved and treated, which is the most important thing. At some point, they will go on display, which we're very excited about. And I do believe that there's serious discussion about reinserting them basically back into the place where they came, from which they came. So we'll see. We
continue to follow it, and at some point in the relatively near future, people can see them at the MFA. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks. You.